Welcome to Be Devoted Ministries, Guard the Trust.
At a time when we appear to be at war on every hand dealing with cultural issues, at a moment when those who are called to be protectors of the truth seem to be missing, during a season when prophets are needed to speak directly from God's Word, in an age where a bastion is needed, a place is needed to make disciples and warriors for the kingdom of God, welcome to Guard the Trust, a podcast that discusses theology, social issues, history, politics, arts, and entertainment from a biblical view. Hold on to your hats. It's time for this show to get started.
My name is Stephen Swain. I'm the president and founder of Be Devoted Ministries, as well as the host of this podcast, Guard the Trust, and I am the author of the book, Walking Faith, Journey from Then Till Now through James, which you can purchase at zulonpress.com/bookstore. That link will be in the show notes below. So let's talk about our hopes and the challenges that lay ahead of us for 2025. Every season of life has its hopes and its challenges, right? And they often exist together. They're parallel, like a train track, right? So it depends on our outlook as to what we think of the year that has passed. For many of us, there will be moments that we had bitter tears, and there are moments when we would have great joy and laughter. It kind of reminds me a lot of my life. If you were to look at me, I'd say that, 2020 and 2021 were really some low points, as it was for most of us. At the same time, I would look at 2022 as a mixed bag, and there had some really high points that had some great moments to it, and they were led by some really low moments. But then 2023 came, and there was some tragedy that struck in our life, in the life of another family, and the results were not good. 2023 was a horrible year, and 2024 started off that way. And I would say that 2024 ended with a great deal of mixture, mostly of victories toward the end, and we'll discuss some of that during this podcast. So we want to look at things from with an understanding. And as many of you know, I use what is known as the C method in dealing with life: Scripture, then external observations, and then experiences. What have I experienced personally in that area? Or have I experienced something personally in that area? So let's turn first of all to the scriptures. And let's look at what the Bible has to say dealing with the new year. How should we face the new year? And I would like to look at the book of Joshua in chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. And in that passage, what we find is that Moses, in chapter 1, Moses has passed, he's died. According to the book of Deuteronomy, his body has been hid by the Lord. You can also find that in the book of Jude, where there's an argument between Michael the archangel and Satan himself, dealing with that. And Joshua is the appointed man to lead. And if you look at chapter 1, you can get the feeling that he is very fearful of what he is about to do. He is the first generation. He's the last. Him and his friend Caleb are the last men standing as far as the first generation of Israelites that were rescued out of bondage out of the land of Egypt. That's it. And this generation he's getting ready to lead is a new generation. They have known nothing but wilderness and wandering life because of their parents and what their parents did. One day maybe I'll do a podcast on that. So he is getting ready to lead that group of people into the promised land. So here's what it states in that passage. It says, "Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and he and all of the sons of Israel set out from Sittim," okay, "and came to Jordan, and they lodged there before they crossed." Now look at verse 2 here. "At the end of the 3 days, the officers went through the midst of the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, 'When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, with the Levitical priest carrying it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. However, there shall be between you and at a distance of about 2,000 cubits by measure.'" In other words, there's supposed to be a fairly large distance. "Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you shall go." Now, that's an important statement, and I've highlighted the statement right behind it, and as the reason why this is an important statement. He says, "For you have not passed this way before." So the warning is given. It's not like we have it today, right? There's no megaphones, there's no microphones, there's no big speakers, there's no texting, there's no social media, there's no way of getting the information about what they're about to do out, except that Joshua gives that command to the elders of Israel, and they go through the people and they command them and they tell them what to do. And they said, when the ark goes out, you're to follow it, but you're to keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits. Do not, in other words, don't get too close, okay? And keep your eyes on it, because so you'll know which way to go, and understand that you've never gone this way before. In all of your wanderings, in the 40 years that you as a generation have wandered all over the wilderness, until the death of the last of your parents, which would have been Moses. Just understand that you've never passed this way before. You don't, in other words, you don't know where you're going. And there's a lot of reasons behind this, because there were going to be two specific things that the Bible points out in the book of Deuteronomy as they prepare to enter into the land. Because the book of Deuteronomy is not a repeat of the book of Exodus. It's not even an overview of the book of Exodus or the book of Leviticus or the book of Numbers. It is a command being given to the new generation by Moses, who's getting ready to die, as to what they're going to need to do and things they're going to need to understand. And there were two things that were going to change once they crossed the Jordan River. They'd never been that way before, right? And one of those is that God would no longer lead them by the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. That was going to go. So how are they going to know where to go? They're going to follow the Ark of the Covenant. That's what they're going to do. The second thing is that the manna that they and their parents had gotten used to, the bread that had the crusty flake on it, they could make and cook into different things. It was sweet, but yet it wasn't too sweet. They were to, that would no longer be provided for them. Once they crossed over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, which would later become Israel, and rightfully so, they were to, that would disappear. That would disappear. So there are some things to observe dealing with this passage. And the first is that according to verse 4, the people of Israel are told to do the following. Okay, so here's what they were to move out when the Ark of the Covenant started moving. Not before, but when it started moving. Okay. Second, they were to keep a safe distance from it. That was an act of reverence. So the keeping the safe distance would not only keep them alive, as we would find out from the book of 2 Samuel, when David had finally rescued the ark. Really, the ark rescued itself. That's a whole interesting story. Go read the book of 2 Samuel for this. Anyway, David retrieved, well, should I say that? He retrieved the ark from the Philistines, and they didn't do it correctly. They put it on a cart rather than carried it the way it was supposed to be carried. And when the cart tipped over a little bit, it looked like it was going to cause the ark to crash. A man put his hand on it to steady it. He did that out of concern and love, but when that happened, he was killed. First of all, he wasn't part of the Levitical priesthood, and second, they weren't carrying it properly like they were supposed to. So, this is keep that distance was an act of reverence. They were to keep an eye on the ark because they had not passed that way before. In other words, you don't follow the ark. You don't follow what God wants you to follow. You're going to get lost. You're going to get confused, and then you're going to be deceived. And you'll always think that you're where you're supposed to be when you know we're close. So this is the idea of keeping our eyes on the Lord and what He has done for us in Christ. Let's keep let's take, should I say, a quick look at 5 areas that are that have some hopeful benefits, but also stay realistic and understand that they are challenges that lay ahead of us, and that we must return. So we must really keep our eyes on Christ. I just had someone text me just a minute ago. In fact, it was my sweet and loving wife who put this. It said, maybe your path is harder because your calling is higher. Sometimes there's a lot of truth to that. So let's take a quick break. This will be our first one, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss one of those 5 areas. This is Stephen Swain, president and founder of Be Devoted Ministries and the host of this podcast, Guard to Trust. If you would like to discuss the possibility of me speaking at one of your engagements or preaching at your church, contact me at the email in the show notes. Please type speaking engagements in the subject line. I'll get back in touch with you and we'll discuss the details. Thank you very much. And now to our podcast. So let's talk about our first area that we would probably need to talk about the most, and that is dealing with politics. So let's look at the hopes and the challenges. Now, President-elect Donald Trump's massive landslide victory in November of 2024 brought a great deal of hope to everyone. In fact, some of the polling in the data that is there shows that there may be, we haven't seen this kind of high hopes, if you will, for our nation since as going back as far as the 1880s and 1890s, maybe the early 1900s. Definitely goes back to the 1920s with Calvin Coolidge and the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. He's brought together a team of people from a variety of political and social backgrounds, causing a broad spectrum of people to take a look at this second attempt at re-election, which he did get. It's a cross-pollination, if you will, of political, social, and religious groups that have allowed this gain of great hope. Whereas in 2016 and in 2020, 2016 when Trump won, and in 2020 when he lost the election to Joe Biden, who is right now at this recording the present president, it brought contempt and contrition. It is still bringing some of that. Okay, so we have some things we can look at in regard to the politics of our nation and how it lends. There are some hopes, but there lays ahead a heavy challenge, and we need to understand that. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. And so before his inauguration on January 6, 2025, Donald Trump is already wielding the power of president. Joe Biden is fading into the graying walls of pontification and doing what he can to spend more money and set things into motion that will make it more difficult for Trump. At the second time, and this time though, being his second time, Trump's second time, old enemies such as legacy media are found waddling in the cesspool of their failing and floundering lies. So there's a lot of things that are going on. So let's look at this, right? Let's look at what he's faced, what we are facing. Really, it's us that are facing it. And that is the inauguration for the new yet former president. And you go, that's a challenge? Yeah. Well, it's a hope. It's a hope, right? So we have this hope that we're going to have a new president, and that even though we have had him as a president before, much like we did with Grover Cleveland back in the 1880s, there's some hope because he's got a record to run on, which is a good thing and can be a bad thing at the same time. That means he has to make it happen. First time he was able to make it happen, how much of it that he made happen was just him stumbling in the dark, and how much of it him making it happen this time is going to be the results of him knowing exactly where he's going, what he's doing. So there was, at least at this point, there was a possible issue with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. As many of you will probably remember, Mike Johnson had he jumped on board the MAGA train and was riding it, but then reality hit, and that reality that hit as a result of understanding that the government needed to be funded, and Trump was putting pressure on him to put a debt ceiling on it. Well, he compromised a bit too much, and he compromised with the Democrats, basically gave them everything they wanted, and set up another $1 trillion package. And that thing fell through, of course. And now there's questions. And even though Trump at this recording has thrown his weight in behind Mike Johnson being the speaker, there's a lot of questions whether or not some of the more conservative Trumpian, if you will, hardcore mega Republicans are going to run with this. They're upset with Mike Johnson. But if Mike Johnson does not retain his speakership by the 3rd of January, then it could cause a whole relay of issues coming up regarding the Speaker of the House and delay. And I don't know how you could do this, because to me it seems like it would be almost unconstitutional. But without the Speaker of the House in place, could be a possible delay in the certification of the Electoral College dealing with the presidential election. Now, we'll talk about the Electoral College this year a little bit further down the line, because it's important. But that's what's going on. Now, anybody, they could come to me. They want to come to me and they offer me, a couple $100,000 and say, hey, will you be the Speaker of the House for the day? No problem. Let's certify this thing, right? So there could always be that possibility. They could go to anybody, and anybody, as long as it's agreed upon by the House of Representatives, anybody can be the Speaker of the House. However, Donald Trump has thrown Donald Trump has learned how to play politics. He threw his hat into the ring for Mike Johnson to be the Speaker of the House, so that basically, so he'd get this thing certified, he could have his inauguration and start getting work done. I'm sure there were some very interesting words that went on in meetings with Mr. Johnson. So we need to be praying for him. We need to be praying for the president-elect, right? So the second thing is the possible, there's actually hope. This started out, I think, as a joke. And once it took off, it's almost like an unstoppable train. Now, as to whether or not this can be a reality, what we're fixing to talk about as far as a hope is concerned, I don't know if it will be or not. But it is the possibility of Canada, Mexico, and Greenland as additional states to the United States and the retaking of the Panama Canal. Now, there are two of those that are more likely to happen than the other two. That is, the retaking of the Panama Canal is extremely possible, right? We'll talk about, let's look at this here, the possible Democrats. So this is the difficulty, possible Democrat opposition to the idea with rhinos, that is, Republicans in name only, in tow. Yeah, these guys cause us a lot of problems. So the thing is that, believe it or not, there are some Canadians and Canadian lawmakers that are actually taking this idea of becoming a 51st state to the United States and making it happen. Now, if this was possible, I would break Canada into 3 different areas. I would make it 3 different states. That's what I would do. Because then you have more conservative end of Canada would be part of the electoral college, and we wouldn't have the more liberal, which happens to be the more populated areas, wouldn't be running that electoral college. My thoughts. Mexico, I doubt, will ever want to become a part of the United States. They still believe that Texas ought to be a part of Mexico, along with California, along with New Mexico, and along with Colorado and Nevada. They think that belongs to them. That's what we fought the Mexican-American War over. So you ought to go read something on that. Sometimes it's interesting. So, but what about Greenland? Greenland, the purchase of Greenland from Holland, from the Dutch, is extremely possible. I see that being a real high mark. And doing that for defense purposes, yeah. And then the Panama Canal, retaking it, yeah, that can happen. There is language in the treaty for that to happen from the 1970s under Jimmy Carter, I felt like then, and my family felt like then, that was a major no, should not have done that, but he did. He gave the Panama Canal up, and it should have stayed inside our military hands and zone. There's also another challenge is possible reunification of the Democratic Party, and it may turn more toward the left and become more socialist oriented. I see that happening. And like one person has already stated, that the only way that the Democrats are going to actually be able to learn their lesson is if they lose in the midterms. And if that's going to happen, the Republicans are going to need to turn up the heat. In other words, all these things, and such as the hopeful financial restoration, that is Doge, the tax cuts, we'll talk about these things a little bit more detail in just a minute. The energy development, all of that, take it to their doorstep. Put them on record saying, no, we don't want that. And then if things go south, for instance, with the tax cuts, also would be the re-implementation, or the continued implementation, should I say, of the 2017 tax cut, keeping that in place. If they're the reasons why everything just goes south, that blame them. Put it on them. Put it on their table, right? And when Doge goes in there, that is the Department of Government Efficiency, which is run by Musk and others. If they don't want to go with these ideas to make things more efficient, hand it to them. Say, these are the people, these are the reasons why we are falling apart, and make it happen. So while there's hope, there's going to be a lot, and it may turn out to be all of this may take a little more time than what's been originally told to us. And there's reasons behind that, and I think good reasons. But I don't think in 100 days we're going to get this thing up and running. It's a long-term, long haul. And if we're going to make it happen, I see it happen, it's going to take a fight. But we're Americans. We know how to do that, or we should. So that's pretty much it. Dealing with the politics, what's going to take, we're going to have a lot of power play going on. But politically, I will remind you that while Trump is offering an awful lot, and he did, by the way, deliver on a huge amount of that his first term. He didn't understand how some of the things worked, I don't think, and that led to some of his downfall in that first. If he had understood how things worked in the swamp, he may have easily come back with a second term, and we would not have had Biden. The problem is we would have probably had Pence running. And while I like Pence, he's not. I don't think he's presidential material. So we're going to discuss the rest, another one of these sections, when we return after our second break. This is Stephen Swain, the president and founder of Be Devoted Ministries and the host of this podcast, Guard the Trust. I am also the author of the book, Walking Faith, Journey from Then to Now through James. This is a devotional through the book of James, thought by thought, idea and insights of what James was trying to convey to his audience at the time and how that relates to us today. So I also, in the process, give other biblical references to those passages and those thoughts, and I tell stories about my life and stories about other people, and look at history and give different thoughts and insights. And it's all done for your enjoyment so that you will gain greater understanding of what James is saying and also how to read other parts of Scripture. You can purchase this at zulonpress.com/bookstore. The link is in the show notes so that you will know exactly where to go to purchase this book. Thank you very much, and now we're going to return to our podcast. Thank you for returning after that break. So, what about our society? How does all of this affect our communities, our lives, our families, right? So, even with everything that goes on at a federal level, eventually it reaches down to our families and our communities, and they are all affected by the decisions that are made. But I want us to understand something, and that is the decisions that we make today are still made at the most local levels. To quote Speaker Tip O'Neill from the 1980s, all politics is local. So you may feel at times out of control on a federal and maybe even on a state level, but you still have control at the local level. And I'll give you, for instance, school boards and school board elections. That is where we can still make some of the biggest changes, and the biggest challenges occur in terms of the onslaught of socialistic thinking and education that comes from a more intrusive level. In other words, the whole idea of education, and we'll just give that for a moment. What are our kids being taught? And this is also where we get into the whole idea that this person knows more here than I do, and so therefore I need to be involved. I don't need to be involved. I need to listen to what they have to say. Listening to what they have to say is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. However, the real problem, the real issue that goes on in education, and this is just free thought here, is the fact that we don't have to necessarily agree to keep up with it from that end. If that makes sense. So, what about other local levels? Like, for instance, becoming a councilman or a mayor or whatever. Then understand that at a local level, we can vote for and help control development that may encourage immorality and destructive factors. We may be able to keep abortion clinics and porn stores and strip clubs and bars out of our neighborhoods and out of our city, and lessen the effects of the sale of alcoholic beverages in our communities. We can do that at a local level. That can be done. So let's talk about it a little bit, and this is going to feed into the politics of things as well, but not totally, right? So the first thing is that more people are aware and involved in local politics. And we already used school board as part of that. Because remember that the Biden administration considered you as a parent to be, forgive all the noise that's going on right now, because I have animals. I have dogs. And they get into it with each other. So anyway, the whole issue dealing with that was that the Biden administration, hang on just one second, folks. So the Biden administration considered those who were concerned parents to be Nazis. They said that, right? They considered them local terrorists. So the challenges that come along with all of this, well, let's go ahead and give some more hopes and highlights, and that is Trump administration does desire to do away with the DOE, that is the Department of Education, and federal funding for education. Now, to some degree, that might be a good idea, but here's the challenges. There's going to be less available, causing some hardships. So with them doing that, now let me just say this much. School districts like the one that I live in are bringing in literally billions and billions of dollars a year. And we don't see that trickle down. Now, I know that when you're running a school district, if you have 150 buildings, and I'm just throwing that out there, okay? You have 150 buildings. All those buildings have to be maintained. And as they get older, there's going to be more maintenance that needs to occur on those buildings, dealing with whatever's going on. So all of that is going on, and there is a constant need to take care of it. So you have to consider the fact that you've got to keep the lights on, you're paying electricity bills, you need to keep things maintenance, you got to pay people to maintain those things in those areas. And so it starts to trickle down. And let me just say this much. With the way that our society works today, and building these bigger and bigger and more technologically advanced football stadiums and things like that, that's just going to be more cost incurred to pay and to take care and to maintain those things. And the more technology, I mean, the old saying is the more plumbing you have, the easier it's going to be to have a clog. You're going to have a problem, right? Things are going to bunch up. And so very little of that money winds up in the classroom paying the teachers. Teachers work per capita more than most people who work year round. Even though it seems like they get all this time off, a lot of that time is spent going to certification classes, going and making sure they're keeping up with certain kinds of things they need to understand, dealing with education, keeping up with the students, even in the off hours. They may work 2 or 3 hours a night after you and I go home and we eat our dinner and we have our fun time and we sit down and enjoy these people, a lot of them are sitting at kitchen tables, grading papers, emailing parents who are mad because they got onto their child because their child sprayed some milk all over another child, and that child's parent is angry. There is a tremendous amount. They spend hours per capita more time doing what they do than any of the rest of us. Okay? And yet they're paid no overtime. None. Nada. They are considered contract labor is what they're considered. And so none of that money makes it into their pockets. None of it does. Except unless they're able to get their grade levels at a certain point in certain tests. And by the way, they spend a tremendous amount of time just testing child after child after child after child under one circumstance after the other, and they're never allowed to actually teach their subject. They do teach their subject, but not at the level that you and I would hope, because it's all about teaching to the test. Okay, remember that the liberals said that will never happen. It happens, and we've got the evidence to prove it. So here's the thing that goes on, right? That money doesn't make it down to the classroom. It doesn't make it to the teachers. It doesn't make it to the students. It doesn't make it anywhere. So if you do this, do what Trump is wanting to do, there's going to be less. It's a challenge. There's going to be less. Now, it could be good too, because then these superintendents who sit there and are making $300,000 and $400,000 a year, and then have, and in their contracts, they even have it set up that if they get fired or they get released out of their contract early, there could be tens of millions of dollars that are going to go to them, and even more so if they retire. So you want to know where your money's going? Start tracking it there. That doesn't include other areas of local law and our local officials that are doing other things in other areas of government. Now, there is now more opposition, this is a hope, to DEI. For instance, we heard recently that Walmart is looking at their DEI program and saying, you know what? We're spending tens of millions of dollars on DEI. We're doing away with it. Right now, there are some that are talking about possibly toning their DEI down while they look at it even more. And so the opposition to DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, those things are going on, and it's causing a great it's a good thing, it's a positive thing. But however, if you as an employee speak up against it in your office, there is still a possibility of losing your job, being socially ostracized, and then there will still be political backlash. There can be. So it's a good thing. There's the challenge. There's still a possibility that you might be doing that. There's a unification across party lines that is occurring. And I'll give you for instance, you have two Democrats, one who's decided that she's going to become a Republican, that's Tulsi Gabbard, and then a former Democrat who is now an independent. He hasn't given any allegiance to the Republican Party, and that's fine with me if he doesn't. That's Bobby Kennedy Jr. All right, so we call him RFK Jr. Either one of these people, they've crossed over. Now, I quite suspect that Tulsi Gabbard still has her eye on the presidency. She's a part of Trump's administration now, or will be if she's voted in. But I still think she has her eye, and whether it probably all depends on whether or not J.D. Vance, decides to run in 2028, whether or not she runs. If she does run, there's very good possibility she'll run as a vice president under Vance, but she's got her eye on the presidency. So don't look her over. She still also believes in a smaller government, and while she believes in making sure that all of our military people have everything they need, if she could, she would start scaling down on a lot of military items. So that can be a good thing, and it can be a bad thing. Just keep your eye on her. As far as Bobby Kennedy Jr. is concerned, his thing is to make America healthy again. That's become his mantra. He's got some good things to say. There's some things that I question that he says, and that's okay. But the big thing to remember about him, though, he is a high regulator. He will want all of this stuff to be regulated and on a higher level in terms of the way everything runs, because he doesn't want us to get things in our food, all right, and I don't either, in our food that could cause health problems and other issues. But at the same time, how do you do that unless you're regulating it extremely heavy? The same thing dealing with our medicines and vaccines that are coming out. There are some things that he says that he thinks that some of the vaccines, cause other issues. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But these two individuals are a couple of what I would consider old-style Democrats from the 20 and 30 years ago. Still want to shave down military, not to the point that it can't respond to anything. Don't want to weaken it, but they're going to look at that as a part of it when we're at a point in time when we need to kind of bulk up on it to get it strengthened before we start talking about doing that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there's also the whole high regulation thing. We want to regulate things real high. So that's something for us to be looking at. Whoops. I've turned to another thing. So that's something those are the challenges. Okay, so let's talk real quick. We're going to take a break, but we're going to go ahead and move on to this real quick here. And that is, if you would like to have me as a guest at your podcast, first of all, do not give me the controls of your slides or anything else, okay? But if you'd like for me to be a guest of your podcast, please contact me using the email in the show notes, but be sure to put podcast guest in that subject line. And so now let's get back with our next thing that we need to look at. So thank you for returning after the break. So sometimes just funny things happen. So let's talk about the economy as far as our hopes and the challenges that await us in 2025 dealing with that. So there's a lot of things that could impact us as far as the finances. So first of all, allow the 2017 tax cuts to be extended. That's a great and positive thing. Again, this kind of feeds into politics, but it doesn't. One of the things I would encourage everybody to do is to really look at their personal finances. But what goes on dealing with these tax cuts is important, because if they allow the tax cuts to expire, okay, the burden on the present day tax on taxes, okay, on the taxpayer, the American taxpayer will be $19 trillion in terms of taxes. Now I have everything that I'm talking about in the show notes. There'll be things going on as far as what that all means. I've got articles. The challenges are always going to be the Democrats and the rhinos that will allow a lapse in the tax the burden to the taxpayers to go on. They're always going to be. It's just going to be one of those things that you have some people that just don't care. And they think that if by some chance they overtax the general population, that somehow they can pull people who are in poverty out of poverty. But at the same time, they set up rules and regulations that keep those same people in poverty. And I'll give you a perfect example of that, is that if a woman goes on social welfare because she has 3 kids, the rule is there can be no man in the home. There can be nobody can be in, as far as a male figure cannot be living in the home. Other than that, she gets no benefits. And the more kids she gets, the more benefits she gets. So this is stupid. Why do we do this? Why is that? Why can we not, if somebody is married and has 3 kids and they're having a hard time and they're struggling to keep their heads above water, how come we can't allow that situation to occur? Or even so, give them a way of, if they do have 3 kids and then they find somebody and they marry them, to be able to help that situation out so that eventually they can get off the tax rolls and be on their own making more money than if they stayed on it. So this is some of the things, and some people just, like the Democrats and the rhinos, just don't get it. Okay. One of the other thing is the additional tax cuts for overtime, tips, and the Social Security. Anybody making over $2,600 a month in Social Security, having those tax cuts is important. So those are the things. Those are going to be excuse me, are going to be some of the things that we are looking at as far as hopes. It would be nice. The likelihood is, folks, I'm going to be real honest, because of those that just don't really care much about things, it's only the same group of people that are going to constantly be trying to keep us from getting any more tax breaks. I remember the day and time when they did not tax tips. That actually was the thing that started existing under Ronald Reagan. I'm not saying that I agreed with everything that Ronald Reagan did, but I agree with the majority of what he did. The other thing that he did that I disagree with was taxing ministers, pastors. Did you know that most pastors are at or just above or just below the poverty level as far as what they make? They get paid. Yeah, they live in a parsonage, but they don't live in those parsonages. If they do live in one, they don't live in them for free. A lot of times they have to pay rent to the church for that. Their car tires cost as much as yours and mine. It's things like that I want people to understand. So that's one of those tax cuts that no one ever talks about. And not only that, but their status as far as their whatever they get in terms of taxes, plus the church's 503Cs and things of that nature, are constantly being threatened by the IRS if the pastor decides to make his own thoughts known. So those are challenges that we face, right? The drill, baby, drill. That's something we've heard constantly from the Trump camp. This has become their campaign slogan. Again, I know they've got a lot of the infrastructure in place that they had. I mean, 4 years, things have deteriorated pretty much, but it's still sitting there. The Keystone Pipeline is still something that will need to be renegotiated as far as it's being built and going up into Canada to retrieve some of their oil and gas. Again, it makes it cheaper, right? Getting all of that is just going to take some time, okay? So, and that's one thing that we just need to understand. It's not going to happen over time, and they're going to have to deal with environmental group and socialist Democrats who want to control everything, especially energy, dealing with the normal American family. They're still upset that this is going to dig into their green agenda. But let me just say this much: the green agenda is not all that it's cracked out to be. It just isn't. It's not that. It's got a lot of problems, and it's kind of like when they wanted people to start painting their houses, the tops of their houses, green and reflective colors to send the heat wave back up to the sun, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that's not real, and it didn't work either. So these are things that to be thinking about. There's the hopes. The hope is that we will extend the tax cuts of 2017 and make them permanent. That those tax breaks will be given as far as not taxing those on Social Security that make $2,600 or more a month. That there will be no taxes on tips and overtime. I would like to see them go where they don't tax ministers for what they make in regards to ministry and pastoring. And then drill, baby, drill. Those are good things, but there's going to be opposition. There's going to be opposition because there's going to be people that don't care about you. And so that's part of it. So it's a lot of ground to cover. So let's go ahead and take another break, and then we'll move to our last couple of subjects and discuss them. This is Stephen Swain. Thank you for being part of Guard the Trust. Hey, this is Stephen Swain here at Be Devoted Ministries Guard the Trust again. Hey, did you know that your business, ministry, or church could be advertising right here? That's right, right here. And by sponsoring and supporting podcasts is one of the cheapest and most affordable ways to be able to get the word out about who you are and what you're doing or what your product is. So get in touch with me through the email in the show notes, and we'll get together and we'll discuss everything as far as that is concerned. In the subject line, make sure that you put sponsor. Now, as a result, you will be helping Be Devoted Ministries grow through publications and this podcast by allowing us to purchase better equipment and allowing us, maybe even allowing me more time to be able to produce better quality video. So make sure you do that. Get a hold of me and let's talk about you sponsoring one of these podcasts, getting your name, your brand, your recognition, your product, your ministry, your efforts as a church out to the public so that they can enjoy the satisfaction of having interacted with you. Now, let's go back to our podcast. Thank you for returning to us after that small break. So let's talk about our next area, dealing with hopes and challenges for 2025 and theology. Of course, it's going to be a part of it. In fact, in our intro, we note the fact that we are going to be discussing things from a theological viewpoint and understanding. So that is our topic, and I think quite possibly this is the most important topic to cover. And there are several things that have gone on theologically over the last 4 years that I want us to look at. And you can see here that part of this is that I think there's the Trump effect, okay? And I'm not so sure. There is. So if you go back to the 1980s and you see where things were falling as far as Ronald Reagan was concerned, you get a real strong understanding that the evangelical movement had a lot, and I mean a lot. You can put that all in caps, bold it, and underscore it, and then highlight it. That's how important the evangelical community was to him. Now, probably not so much dealing with Donald Trump, and there's a lot of reasons why. Most of it just has something to do with personality and language and things of that nature. But the evangelical community was still a very important part dealing with it. And I think there's an underlying current that's not quite developed as strongly as I was hoping that it would for 2024 and moving into 2025. So there were several things that happened over the last 4 years, and especially within since signs of these things going on in 2024. Now, we still have to deal with wokeism and the pushback on it. The educrats, the politicians, the courts, less than 1% of our society are claiming to be what they really are not. All of those things have a part and a place to play in some of the challenges that lay ahead. But and I'm really not as enthusiastic about the conservative movement amongst in the United States as I was, let's say, 30, 40 years ago. And there's some reason, but there are some things to make note of. And one of them is the split from the UMC, the United Methodist Church, and the results of the conservatives splitting out from the United Methodist, the UMC, and creating the GMC, which would be the Global Methodist Church. And that was developed by the conservatives in 2023. Right now, the Global Methodist Church is boasting of over 4,200 churches worldwide, but it continues to grow as more and more United Methodist churches are growing more or less. They're just pulling away, and it's a slow pull. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, and that's because of the arc in terms of the way the United Methodist Church works, their handling of properties, and so forth and on. The other one is the Southern Baptist, and they're being able to hold off any further liberal advancements. And that's about as far as we can say on that. They didn't really move ahead as strongly as I really would have liked to see the conservatives inside the Southern Baptists. And the reason is because there's this sick, and I mean sick, S-I-C-K, thought regarding the way you handle things. It's political in nature. It really is. So in 2010, the conservative resurgence, which started in 1979, if anybody really understands the history, it started more like in 1963, was declared a success, and I think a wrongful success, okay? And the reason is because there was one problem. They were about to hand things off to a generation that didn't understand. They did not understand what the conservative resurgence was all about, and were willing to hide their more liberal views under and keep them under wraps. They just were. They just didn't want that to go on. Now, as you can see, the challenges that deal with this is because we have Democrat and socialists that have infiltrated many of our denominations that once were hard conservatives. And with the Southern Baptists, that's been just as true, probably not more true. The biggest mistake that they made was when the opportunities came time to review their state convention contracts, because they're contracted. And when the reviews came, their more moderate liberal conventions, they handed them freedom. I'll give you, and allowed them to stay in the convention. I'll give you a first-hand look at that from the state of Texas viewpoint. So the BGCT, which is the Baptist General Convention of Texas, that was at one time the state convention from the state of Texas to the Southern Baptist Convention. They're also known as the Texas Baptist and sometimes the Texas Baptist Convention, TBC. When their opportunity came, and they aligned themselves very strongly with a very liberal group known as Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. Now, they have when it came time for them to review their history, their policies, their theology, and despite their constant saber rattling over the last 40 years, they were allowed to stay. The problem is that in each of those situations, the IMB, the International Missions Board, and NAM, which is North American Missions Board, they interfered in some of those reviews. Both of those entities run their organizations at the tune of $500 to $700 million, almost $500 million a year. And they were constantly in there encouraging the reviewers to overlook everything. For instance, before the BGCT split of 1999, which caused the conservatives launched the SBTC, which is the Southern Baptist Texas Convention, and who aligned themselves with the Baptist Missionary Association of America, totally different set of Baptists. The BGCT gave $22,434,837 a year to the Cooperative Fund, which helps fund missions, church planting, and the educational, the seminaries. Today, after the split, the BGCT gave only $9,347,356. Let's go back over that again. $9,347,356. The conservative counterpart, the SBTC, gave $14,596,884. So it's almost little less than half, twice as much. In 1999, however, the Southern Baptists of Texas gave $610,453. At one point, when I was keeping track of all this, there was almost a total between the two conventions, $60 million being given. If you knock out one of those conventions, which the Southern Baptists have almost lost the Southern Baptists of Texas convention a couple of times. If you knock those out, you knock quite a bit of money out from their resources. Okay? Now, in 2016 was the year that things really started, 6 years after this great, we've won from the conservatives. 2016's rumblings of female pastors started moving through the National Convention. Let me just say this much before I go any further with that. The BGCT or the TBC, whichever you want to call them, the Texas Baptist Convention, also known as the Baptist General Convention of Texas, either one of those, they supported the idea of female pastors. There are female pastors sitting inside that convention. I do not agree with that. Conservative, no. But there was this rumbling. But it came to a head in 2018 when J.D. Greear became the 62nd president of the Southern Baptist Convention. During that time, people like Beth Moore stepped up and started claiming that this issue was biblical. Now, she left in 2021. She left the convention. She left in disgrace. And it was during that time that J.D. Greear had an unprecedented, and I think, according to the bylaws and the Constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention, it was an unconstitutional third term. Now, that was during COVID, everything going on with it. There was a way to handle that, and they didn't. They just went the lazy route, and they let J.D. Greear have a third term. Now, J.D. Greear, along with voices like David Platt and others, led the convention into a state of wokeism, caused division in the convention over the issue of masking because of the virus, the idea of systematic racism, making claim that Americans were racist, especially if you were white, that there was systemic racism that was involved. And if you don't know what systemic racism is that there is racism involved in the system. Okay? May not be with the people, but it's in with the system. They supported BLM and claimed that churches that were open during the shutdowns were being unchristian and unbiblical. When actually the reality is they were the ones being unchristian and unbiblical. Now, he also likened those who criticized him for his stands as Nazis in his sermon at New Orleans Baptist Seminary. He was also opposed to Trump speaking at the convention in 2016. So J.D. Greear really is, he's not the point. He's the point man, but he is not when this started way back in 2016 and just went downhill. Now, J.D. Greear handed the keys to the presidency to Ed Litton, which was an embarrassment and found to be a sermon plagiarist. And it wasn't just with the J.D. Greear. J.D. Greear and he were friends, and he plagiarized a lot of J.D. Greer's stuff. But J.D. Greear said, yeah, it's fine with me, go ahead. But he didn't do it just with him. He did it with others, and come to find out, yeah, he didn't have permission from them. Okay? So in 2022 through 2024, so Ed Litton Okay, Ed Linton only got one time through as president. That was it. Everybody was done with him. And he never gave a great answer on anything. In 2022 through 2024, though, Bart Barber became who had been the secretary of the convention for several years and who knew where the proverbial bodies were buried. He became president. I look at him kind of as, even though I think he was probably he was much kinder person, probably much nicer person, but he did with his role the same, what he handled it the same way that that Joseph, I want to be careful with this, okay, because I don't think he's Joseph Stalin, okay, but he handled it because Joseph Stalin, Lenin didn't like Joseph Stalin, so he gave Joseph Stalin a job, and he became the general secretary, and as the general secretary he got all the information on everything and everybody, and once Lenin died he knew everybody's everything, and that's kind of the way it worked with a little bit with Bart Barber. I don't think he was anything near Joseph Stalin, but he used his powers as secretary when he became president in that same fashion. He knew where everybody's everything was. And there were stories that was told to me regarding some of that. So, but he kept the conservatives at bay, which is interesting because Bart Barber at one time was a hardened conservative until the last 4 or 5 years. So he kept the conservatives at bay for those 2 years, opposed the amendment to the convention's constitution against women pastors that would have become known as the Law Amendment. So Mike Law put a amendment out there in 2023. It passed, okay, in a public show and display, but it has to wait 1 more year and to get its full certification to be added into the Constitution. And it passed by some very high numbers. But in 2024, under Bart Barber, when they went to pass it again for its second time around to make it a permanent part of the Constitution, it was done under secret ballot, and it lost. It had to have 68% of the vote, and it only won 63 to 65% of the vote. So it was really close. Had it been a public display like the first one vote, I think it would have succeeded because there would have been pressure there. So they were able to avert that. They did away with the law amendment, which was stating that women could not be pastors of churches. And they go, well, it's already stated that way in the 2000 Baptist Faith and Message, which is basically a doctrinal statement for the Southern Baptists. And said it already states that. It shouldn't have to be stated in our Constitution. Which I have questions about that. So anyway, but Bart Barber did oversee the expulsion of Rick Warren and the church that Mr. Warren pioneered called Saddleback, and Fern Creek Baptist Church over the issue of female pastors. So in 2024, the following year, which would have been this last year, the law amendment, of course, did not pass. So that all happened in 2023, and in 2024, the law amendment did not get certified. Now, right now, Clint Presley is who is a little bit more conservative than the aforementioned presidents, the last 3. He became president in 2024, and all has been quiet so far this year, which may not be a good thing. but it is something to understand in regards to everything that's going on. So my hopes is that the SBC will start turning more toward the right, since the national premise appears to be doing so politically. I wish this would have been the other way around, that the SBC would have turned itself more to the right, and then the results of that would have been more of a shift for politically, like it was in the 80s. But it is not, and it did not go that way, and it did, and hopefully it doesn't stall out. This is just kind of an issue with the Southern Baptists. They can move to the right, and then all of a sudden they swing back to the left, and I don't understand why it is that way, except for the fact that they have this crazy thought about somehow they're supposed to, you're not supposed to criticize a brother, whatever that means. So anyway, so I can't criticize anybody's theologically wrong. But anyway, so starting in March, I will be putting my ears to the track, and we'll see what happens, what shows up, and start reporting on it. But it is, it's been an interesting time, so to speak. So let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll be talking about our last section, and that is entertainment. What has entertainment done over the last few years? Where is it standing? And we're going to be looking mainly at movies and films, not in detail, just kind of an overview. So this is Stephen Swain. After this break, I'll be right back. This is Stephen Swain, president and founder of Be Devoted Ministries and the host of this podcast, Guard the Trust. If you would like to discuss the possibility of me speaking at one of your engagements or preaching at your church, contact me at the email in the show notes. Please type speaking engagements in the subject line. I'll get back in touch with you and we'll discuss the details. Thank you very much. And now to our podcast. Hey, thank you for taking the time out to work through this all with us. I know it's been a long podcast, but hopefully you're able to drive down the road or jog a little bit more, and now you can listen to some more of it. And that's one reason why we do the breaks. So thank you for returning with us. So let's talk about entertainment now, and we'll end it on this note. This should be a small section. Let's talk about the positives of entertainment as we saw in 2024, and I believe will continue in 2025. And that is, according to Newsmax article, faith films and things of that nature may be what actually saved Hollywood from its destruction. Again, these links on all of this information that I'm giving you is in the show notes. 2023 and 2024 were down years for Hollywood for two primary reasons. One is that they constantly push toward wokeism, uh, and which is a part of their makeup now, and was part of what was being rejected by the election of former and now President-elect Donald Trump. And the other reason for it is that the economic impacts on families' pocketbooks due to inflation. So those are some of the things that were going on with that. Now, I would encourage you, and I will put it in the show notes again, encourage you to listen to WDW Pro Show about these issues and Disney's past pushes on the world in regards to woke. Again, I put their link there. They do a very great service there to the public to understand what's going on. Now, according to the article, the Newsmax article, Fathom Events has seen a 45% rise in religious programming, anime, and old movies. So they've noticed that a lot of people are shifting in that direction. They point to The Chosen, which I would not. I have a problem with The Chosen on a lot of grounds. And I haven't done any reviews, but I have seen a couple of them and I didn't like them. And there's some people that have done some reviews on The Chosen. You can go out there and take a look at them. But The Chosen, they pointed to The Chosen as the largest beneficiary at $31 million gross, which if you've seen The Chosen and you understand your Bible and you've really read your Bible, yeah, you probably wander away from that as quick as you can. But overall, Box Office Mojo saw a drop from $9 billion in 2023 to $7.3 billion in 2024. So what the article does not cover, though, is such independent, well-made, and cast-effective movies as Reagan that made close to somewhere between $30 to $60 million and is still bringing in millions of more dollars. It took close to 25 million to make it. Okay, so that was an independent film that was made, and it made and grossed almost as much, if not more, as The Chosen. So it's not just religious based, but independent based filmmakers all the way around. That would also include the effects of Floridian independent movie makers such as Kevin and Sam, should I say, his wife, Kevin and Sam Sorbo Studios, which make faith-based films on shoestrings budgets, which you can see those streamed on streaming platforms such as Netflix. I'm putting the show note in the show notes below for you to go to them. So this is the kind of information that is good news, and the fact that we should, I think I got behind on my notes. See, there we go. Whoops, back up. So this kind of information is good news. The fact that so many of these production companies, both in Hollywood and in Florida, have a positive message, do not go into detailed gore, and is unwilling to compromise on the truth of morality. Now for our negatives, there it is. I already produced it. The negative is China is making more movies with higher CGI resolution and better storylines than the Hollywood films. Understand that there's a problem because it shows the production companies such as Disney as sharing their technology. And Disney does. Disney made the live action Mulan near a prisoner camp when they made that movie. And then when it was over, they publicly thanked. This is the stupid end. They publicly thanked the Chinese government for keeping the noise levels down at that camp. These are prisoner. You understand, those are prisoner camps, are political prisoners, right? I mean, so while things like that, Disney is feeling the financial and social pressures dealing with doing away with woke characters and attempting to destroy family units, which at one time it claimed to support. There's still a lot of negatives. And I daily go through the shorts and the film trailers for upcoming films, and there are two issues I see right now that continue. We talked about China. That's one. But the other is that many of the movies are CGI fascinations with limited storylines. Now, we had a few like Godzilla -1 that did a good job at mixing the two and did a great job with the CGI, and then at the same time did a great job with giving us a good, strong storyline mixed with it. They didn't attempt to overdo it on either side. The other problem that I see coming up is that the gore and immorality are still involved in the movies. And there's no range that is left for imagination. You go to see, and this is one reason why I think older films that Newsmax was talking about is making a comeback. Because there are times when you look at some of the old movies, like television shows, series, like for instance, Matt watching some of the old Gunsmoke, and even up to the end of the series. By that time, they were really starting to get pretty gritty with things. But some of the Gunsmokes, they go in, there's a guy with a shotgun, and he blows a guy away. We never see the guy that got blown away by the shotgun. They all look with a very grimace look on their face, like, oh, that doesn't look good. And leaves the rest of it to you to think about what that might be. One of my problems with Private Ryan is I felt like in Private Ryan, they just showed way too much. Men dying out on the beaches at Omaha, I understand. I got it. I read the books. I've read articles. I've seen film footage. I don't have to have a guy trying to hold his intestines in on the beach, screaming for his mother. I don't have to see that. I got it. I know that war is not good and that the effects of war are not good. I got it. I've read the articles. I've read the books. I've seen the photos. I don't have to see that. That's not a part of entertainment. I don't need gore, and I don't want immorality. There was one particular series that my wife and I were watching not long ago. It's a fairly recent series. And if you would cut out all the sleeping around that goes on in the show, and we finally just said we've had it, we're not watching that anymore. If you cut all of that out and put it all together and kept the storyline, kept the writing, kept the acting just like it is, without anybody sleeping around with anybody else, guess what? You would have had a great show. One that even possibly children could have watched. It may not have been totally G-rated, but you certainly you don't have to have all that stuff. But they continue to produce that junk. And like I said, we watched it to a point and then we said, yeah, it's over. So nothing the final thought is this, that nothing from dealing with Hollywood, nothing original is being allowed through Hollywood, which is one reason why independent companies are starting to rise up and take more and make more money. So as a final thought on how all this in the entertainment industry will play out, is that the movie theaters, who, by the way, do not make money off of ticket sales. You see that concession stand with the popcorn and selling the overpriced sodas and the overpriced candy that are in bigger boxes and wrappers than you really need to have them in? Those things, those items, that's where they make their money. They're going to get tired of it. They're going to be going like, nobody's coming and watching this stuff. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, you know what? We're going to turn to the independent industry and we'll bring more of their stuff in. And that's what they're doing, because it's falling apart. They've gone from making $9 billion to $7.3 billion through Hollywood films. But when it comes to the independent filmmakers and when it comes to the Christian and faith-based filmmakers, they're rolling in. And the reason is because Christians will go watch that because they don't have to worry about what they're about to see. So, hey, Kevin Sorbo, I got some ideas for some great movies or that might express faith in Christ and may bring some entertainment value as well. Hint, hint, if anybody knows him. Okay, so let's move in to our final thoughts right now, okay? And oh, here comes the other thoughts. Those are the negatives, right? We're talking about all that. so let's move into our final thoughts on this. And that is this, okay? And I want you to get it. That no matter how things turn out, our faith should not be in men, but in God. Like the people of Israel in the days of Joshua, who had to keep their eyes on the Ark of the Covenant, we also should keep our eyes on our covenant maker himself, that is Jesus Christ. There's going to be ups and downs politically. There are going to be ups and downs theologically. There's going to be ups and downs dealing with entertainment and dealing with finances and dealing with health and dealing with everything else. But our eyes have to stay on him. Listen to this. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Fixing, that means to grab hold of, right? To look, grab hold of. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Right there. There's our mandate. Don't put our faith in people. Trump will fail you. He's going to fail us. The Democratic Party has failed us. The rhinos are failing us. The Republican Party will fail us. Tax cuts will fail us. Some will happen and some won't. Some will have the impact that we're hoping they will have. Others will not have that impact. The hopes for better energy, stronger energy, may produce lower prices. It may cause things to go up as well. Hope for peace in the Middle East and between Russia and Ukraine under the Trump administrations might happen. It might not. Our hope is not in what men can do. Hollywood will continue to let us down. Wokeism will continue to thrive in some areas of our lives, professionally and otherwise. But in the end, we don't let those things determine whether or not we're going to have a good year. The key is not really to have a good year. The key is to stay faithful. That's what the key is. So, until next week, remember to follow the Lord Jesus Christ with the help of His Holy Spirit, being guided by His Word, and attend as well as participate in the local church you belong to. This is Stephen Swain, and I'm signing off.